Mr. Chris Letch, Mr. Shane Jones, Mr. Shane Retty, Mr. Tony Savage, Mr. Ash Howell, Mr. Simon Wilson, and Mr. Lloyd Burr. Welcome, folks.
Καλησπέρα. Καλησπέρα και καλώς ήρθατε σε αυτό το συνέδριο. Είμαστε πολύ τυχεροί που μένουμε σε μια χώρα που μπορούμε να ψηφίσουμε την κυβέρνησή μας. Good evening and welcome to everybody. I have welcomed you in the language of the birthplace of democracy. It is my pleasure to introduce the organiser of this auspicious occasion, MC and moderator for the evening, Mr. Albie Barr from Grow Northland Rail.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Albert Barr aho. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Grow Northland Rail political debate this evening. It's great to have a good crowd in. Weather hasn't been great. I'd like to say hello to the people out there in Faceache Land who are watching on the live stream there in News Hub's live stream, all the friends in the various groups that are out there in social media. And I'd like to welcome also politicians that'll be watching and all the campaign crews that are working hard in the 2017 election. And boy, what an election we've got. We've had it all in this election, folks. And it's a great privilege to have some top-line candidates here for Whangarei. This has been the best crop that we've had in many years, certainly the 6 years I've been here. But, you know, people that have been around a while said this is just a fantastic crop. So the order of the evening, folks, is we'll ask each candidate to come up and have a 2-minute kōrero, and then they'll be seated, and then I'm going to have a little chat to them about, you know, where they're at with their campaign, what they've been up to, and a bit about themselves. And then we're going to, you know, since it's a rail forum, we're going to have a little kōrero around what they've done for rail and some of their vision there. So I'd like to, without further ado, welcome the spin-off man himself, Simon Wilson. Give him a warm welcome, folks. He's on the panel. Editor for the spin-off. You follow politics. Simon pens great articles on the spin-off website.
Thank you, Albie.
And also got Lloyd Burr from News Hub. Pleasure to have Lloyd Burr here. Lloyd's done a great job today, and last week they've been out here filming. So on the 6 o'clock news, he's plugging for rail. He's interviewed the various MPs and people on the street, what they think about growing Northland Rail. So I missed that, but I understand the reports are it was very positive. So thanks, Lloyd. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first speaker. He's a local politician. Chris Letch is a doyen of activism here in this town, and there's been some other forums where Chris has been left out, which is totally unacceptable, in my opinion. So it's with warm welcome I introduce the lectern for his 2-minute speech, Chris Letch. Give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Albie, and thank you for organising this event, and thank you to all of you for turning up, because I think you would find it very difficult to come across anybody in Whangarei or even in Northland that didn't think rail was an absolute priority for our region. And of course, you're not the only ones, because countries like China think that rail is an absolute priority, and they want to actually have a part of building a rail system in Whangarei. But they launched an initiative called One Road, One Belt, which is an initiative to build a superhighway to the markets of Europe across Asia. A superhighway that would make our little superhighway from Whangarei to Ruakaka look like playing tiddlywinks, really. But one of the things that they think is vitally important is, along with that superhighway, they're building a rail line consequently to that. And And for me, that's particularly important. So to pull all of those things together, I ran 6 public meetings this year about the issue of Chinese involvement in our infrastructure, rail for Northland, and how we could fund that, and why funding for rail is not an issue. No public-private partnerships, no borrowing from overseas banks, because those 2 options simply fleece taxpayers of even more of their money that should be going into hospitals, into education, into police, and into conservation. You see, the Chinese government do things sensibly. They get the money to build that superhighway and that rail link from their own central bank. They don't have public-private partnerships and they don't borrow it from overseas banks. Our government could do exactly the same thing. It could get the money for all of these kind of projects from our own central bank. It's called the Reserve Bank, and it's been done before. In fact, it was done by the Labour Party way back in the 1930s after the Depression. It's how the Labour Party funded 30,000 houses way back then in the 30s.
Thanks, mate. Awesome. All right, I'd like to now invite up Shane Jones, New Zealand First candidate for Whangarei.
Good evening, folks. Thank you very much for coming out this evening to support this initiative. I think there's 12 days to go. Some of you may already have voted. If that's the case, what are you doing here? A number of you may have made your mind up as to how you're going to vote. My role this evening, apart from acknowledging the efforts of both activists, business people and advocates for rail, is to remind you that you ought to buy yourselves some insurance as you watch the 2 larger parties battle it out and try and storm back to Parliament without realising, in the absence of the support of New Zealand First, they will not get there. Our party, Albie, to acknowledge you as the organiser and your team and my fellow candidates, our party has a very clear plan that has rail integral to what we believe ought to happen in this part of the north. This is our provincial capital. We have, we believe, the premier deep sea port in New Zealand, thoroughly neglected and marginalised. We will, if Providence via the electoral system gives us enough votes and power, we will be putting the railway spur into Marsden Point to catalyse the development of our region by industrialising the area around the port and, all going well, introducing a North Port development bill that people can debate and facilitate the relocation of industry, jobs and investment out of Auckland into the north. So when you listen to myself and you hear from our party, please conceive what we're saying as a plan for Whangarei. A plan that will attract jobs, a plan that will attract investment, and a plan that will bring revitalisation into this part of the north at a level we have never seen before. It is a legacy project. It's a project that a nation does once in 100 years, perhaps, but it is a nation-building project. Shane Jones, thank you very much.
Awesome, Shane. Well done. All righty. It's a privilege to welcome Dr. Shane Reti to the stage. Great to have you here.
Kia ora mai tātou. My name is Dr. Shane Reti. I have the privilege of being your MP. I want to acknowledge the organisers, also want to acknowledge the other candidates. Finally, tēnā koe mo te kaupapa mo tēnei wiki te wiki o te reo Māori. Just like to acknowledge the week of te reo Māori. I want to start by saying I'm very proud of this electorate. Proud to have lived here for 30 years, a local doc for 20 of those, offshore for 7 as a Harvard professor and economic development expert out of the Dubai consulate. I enjoy living this electorate and sharing with you the highs and lows of daily life. My children were all born here. They were all schooled here. And to all the educators, I say thank you for the gift that you give. I'm so pleased that our community is growing and that our local economy is growing. No one's disagreeing that the economy is strong. Opposition leaders readily concede that the economy is strong. We just have differences around how to keep it that way. As an electorate, we're growing. People want to move here, and they are. 1,500 people a year are moving to Whangarei, and this growth is revitalising our city. People are returning, just as our families are also returning from overseas. Every new household in Whangarei injects $1,000 of household expenditure into our local economy, into our local businesses. Food, transport, accommodation. Jobs remain a high priority. In 2014, I promised 3,000 jobs in 3 years. Together, we got there in 2. A good life, however, is more than just jobs. And you told us that jobs in the economy were the number one priority, and we've acted. But we've also heard the voices for housing, poverty and inequality. And we're acting on this with the Family Incomes Package, Housing Accord, and cutting RMA red tape. A strong economy and a surplus gives us the tools to tackle these problems, which I accept are real and important. In summary, I'm privileged to be one amongst many as our city grows and we start to reach our potential, and so I'm asking for your support. Thank you. Thank you.
Well done, Shane. All right, folks, here we go. Tony Savage. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Albie, for organising this, and I also acknowledge my other candidates, and thank you for your warm welcome. I won't take very long, because I know that you all want to get back to enjoying your massive wage growth you've had over the last 9 years. Or perhaps it's that trickle-down theory from National that you're waiting for. Just give them another 3 years, you might get it. What do you say? Or perhaps you don't want to lose yourself in the line for your elective surgery for your hips and knees, because they might reassign you to keep those stats nice and clean. And I know at a mere $500,000 in Whangarei, we've got lots of affordable housing for you to get back to. You know as well as I do that the truth is how you actually feel about wages, how you actually feel about your cost of living and your prospects matters more than the numbers the government is spelling to you. If you feel like you're going backwards, or maybe treading water, how can we claim we're moving forwards? In fact, you know as well as I do that this is not the New Zealand, the fair New Zealand that you grew up in, or the fair New Zealand you want your children to grow up in. I was asked at the game on Saturday, you know, when we trounced the mighty Waikato, and it's hard for me to say that because I grew up in the Waikato. Can we actually believe what you guys are saying, us? Can we dare to hope that it's going to get better after all the promises from the last decade? And the answer is emphatically yes. Why? Because I have never been more inspired by our message, and never so sure that this time we're going to do this. Whangarei, be sure that no one owes us anything. You need to fight for your share. That's why you need a representative in government. And if you believe that future government will be Labour, then you need me in there.
Thanks, Tony. Last but not least, we have a young man who's really making an impact in this town. I'd like to welcome Ash Holwell.
Kia ora whanau, ko pareha ki te maunga, ko hātea te awa, ko pehi awari, tahi ono whare bike te marae, e te ana hau ki te whakamana te tiriti. Thank you all for being out here tonight. Thank you, Albie, for organising fellow candidates to see you guys yet again, and Simon and Lloyd for coming up, and it's great to have such a cool turnout. I started my journey to be here in front of you guys by living next to the train station here in Whangarei, when I began Whare Bikes, the community bike project that has given away hundreds of bikes to people in Whangarei who need them the most. So I've had a close connection to the railways, been woken up at 5 a.m. every morning by them, and also to actual sustainable and useful transport solutions here in Whangarei. I've also run for council and mayor because I'm deeply committed to a brighter future for Whangarei, and that's why I'm here to ask you all to vote for the Green Party. We will hear tonight about how Whangarei and Northland has been forgotten. And I agree, that's true, but I think it runs far, far deeper than that. We've all been forgotten. We've all been forgotten in the last 30 years, except for an elite few. When did we stop having basic things, basic necessities, like warm housing, healthy food, swimmable rivers, and functioning railways? Basic necessities. When we look at transporting goods and ourselves around, rail is a basic necessity. And I'm here with the Green Party because this year, it cannot be denied that poverty is so bright on the agenda because of the work of the Green Party. Swimmable rivers are on the agenda because of decades of work of the Green Party. And the biggest case in point, climate change, is now being talked about at the highest of levels and now pretending not to be ignored at the highest of levels because of the work of the Green Party. And if we're going to have future transport systems, then we will always continue to lead the way for you all. Thank you.
Awesome. Nice, Ash. Okay, folks, so what we're going to do now, they've all given us a good insight what they stand for. We're going to go into rail, what they've done for rail. So I'm going to ask just pretty much a yes or no question. They can have a little bit of time to elaborate. I'm just going to go along with the table, all right? So Chris, I want to talk about the infrastructure fund. Did you submit, that goes to all you, did you submit to the infrastructure fund to protect the corridor going out to Northport?
It's on,
Yeah.
I think. Yes, I did, Albie. I put a submission into the NRC and also gave a verbal submission to it as well. Absolutely, that fund should be retained for the purpose that it was put there for in the first place, and that's rail to the port.
Excellent. Okay, Shane, so you were a diplomat at the time, so I'm not sure how the rules go there, but you got an answer for that one?
I want us all to remember that when the SOEs were sold 4 or 5 years ago by the John Key government, they were sold so that the nation could meet the costs of infrastructure. That was the rationalisation we were given. If that's the case, why are we calling for private capital to rebuild Whangarei Boys High? Secondly, our party has a very clear focus on using and incentivising two things. Number one, utilisation of the Cullen Fund, more direct investment into long-term essential infrastructure assets in New Zealand, and secondly, the creation of a new Kiwi infrastructure fund.
All righty, awesome. Dr. Shane Reddy, you submit to the infrastructure fund.
No, I did not. Furthermore, okay, thank you. Furthermore, PPPs are a very effective way to raise capital for large projects. The very first one was Hobsonville Primary and Secondary School. Christchurch outpatients have also been bought by it, have also been funded by it. There are some things that a PPP can do that government can't do by themselves. So I'm actually quite proud of the fact that we're able to get Boys High over the line at $50 million under a PPP.
Okay, so for those who don't know, it's a public-private partnership, PPP. Right? Okay, Tony.
I certainly did. I submitted or co-submitted with an outfit, I think they're called Grow Northern Rail, and a certain other presenter who took up far too much time allowed me a small amount of time to present to council. And what I wanted to let them know was that Labor will not allow that corridor to be removed, to be taken up for roads or whatever else the national government has. That is there for rail. We're not going to let it go away.
Awesome. And Ash, did you submit?
Well, I think the PPP that's closest to the discussion tonight is the new toll road that we drive on to Auckland that's funding a private company every time we drive that way. I submitted. 3 separate councillors asked my research after my submission, and the video of the submission that I did at our kind of defunct railway station has over 3,000 views online at the moment.
Okay, well done. Okay, so since we've raised public-private partnerships, you'd all remember not so long ago, the Chinese Premier visited. And Northland became the focus of a group of Chinese, a construction company. They were labelled as China Rail. Well, they weren't China Rail, because a lawyer from Auckland rang me and gave me the information that it wasn't actually China Rail Corporation, it was a Chinese construction company. And what we had there was we had a chairman of the Northland Regional Council and Malcolm the executive negotiating with the Chinese in secrecy. A memorandum of understanding. And at the time, Radio New Zealand was trying to pin down the National Party. Dr. Shane Reti, did you meet with the Chinese construction company?
Boy, I hope so. I would hope that the answer to that's yes. I would hope that the mayor, I would hope that the
No,
regional
I'm
council...
specifically talking to you.
Oh, absolutely. I would hope that all the major stakeholders, if a potential large investor in Northland comes to town, I would hope that they all met with them. So yes, indeed, I met with them for about 15, 20 minutes.
And Simon Bridges, the Transport Minister?
Oh, I have no idea.
And the
I
building?
don't-
You
I
mean
don't
to
know.
tell me that you're the MP for Whangarei,
Correct.
and there's been no communication there with the
There was
Transport Minister?
There was no point. It was a ceremonial meeting for 15 to 20 minutes along with all the other key councils in Whangarei. So yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so you had Bill English who come out and he said, I'm not opposed to foreigners, including the Chinese, owning toll roads and rail links. So we need some transparency before polling day on that one. So we'll follow that one up. I'm sure Lloyd will chase that one up. Okay, so that's a good insight there. I think we've covered it. Most of you have seen the online version from the Advocate. A lot of you have. So that's the candidates. We've got 3 formats here tonight. So I'd like to thank... Oh, hang on. Lloyd Burr's got a question. Here we go.
That was deliberate, sorry.
Oh, shit. Oh, there we go.
Hold all tickets.
Excuse my language, everyone. I've got a few questions. First question is to Tony Savage. That is your name, isn't it? Yes, sorry.
These people from Auckland, they don't look after the regions. They don't even know where it exists.
Wellington.
I'm not from Auckland.
Oh, Wellington then.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Beltway.
You might end up there, mate, so
Thank you for your
be
support.
careful. You stood up there and you said, let's do this.
Yeah.
When you say this, is Labor committing to upgrading the line from Auckland to Whangarei and connecting it to Northland?
So what I said is that no one owes us anything. You know, when you're in government, everybody wants everything. We've got to fight for that. And Labor will do it if we fight for it, and I'm the man to do it. So there's no guarantees. You've got to go out and build the business case, you've got to have the networks, which lucky enough I have, and go to government and say, because they get tons of people asking for everything. What I'm saying is, if we advocate properly and have a strong person in government, we've got a good chance at making it happen.
Okay, so
But
it's
I
not,
can't
let's,
guarantee-
it's not let's do this, it's let's try and do this.
The let's do this. The let's do this refers to the overall policy plan of putting, reducing poverty and putting every child in a warm, dry house. You've seen our first 100 days. It's not just about rail.
This is a rail forum, that's why I was
Yes,
asking.
but we're asked to introduce ourselves generally.
It means let's do everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's do everything within reason. Yes, thank you, Simon.
You got any questions, Simon?
I do.
Fire
Shane Reddy, can I just go back to you? I was a little bit confused about your last response to Albie. The National Party is one of only 2 parties in Parliament, to my knowledge, that doesn't have a policy of developing regional rail. In fact, you're opposed to it. Would that be right?
If there's a business case, which my colleague here correctly said, if there's a business case and if business will use rail, then we'll certainly explore it.
Yeah, but really the National Party's position is that there isn't a business case.
That's correct.
Right. So you're sitting there, I think alone on the table, opposed to the development of regional rail.
In the absence of a business case, correct.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so behind you it says Grow Northland Rail. Do you disagree with that?
If there's no business case and it's not wise use of taxpayers' money, then it'd be very hard to look at spending money on developing rail, correct. Actually, already did. May I address? No, sorry, I'll take
Have you done some polling, have you?
No, I haven't, but it was already looked at a few years ago. And who did they ask? They asked Fonterras, Emery Tableware, Golden Bay Cement, AFCO, Silver Fern Farms, Kaurau Harvey Whangarei, Kaihu Valley Sawmill, Kaurau Harvey Future Build, Jukin, Marasumi, Forest Loaders, Balance Fertiliser, Ravensdown Fertiliser, Fletcher Steel, Steel and Chew, Vulcan Steel, Delta Produce, Progressive Enterprises.
Okay, Shane.
Where I'm going here?
Okay, so all of
none of them were prepared to support it.
And so all of them don't want rail?
Correct.
So would all of them be happy for the rail line
So
to disappear?
Shane,
They did not support
Shane, if
rail.
I was to say to you that there is another list, and it's a list of freightways and toll and main freight and some of the largest freight companies in the country, which work not just on roads, of course, but roads and rail, work across the different modes. If I was to say to you that their voices are growing louder, that the country needs to develop a multimodal approach to freight, Do you not?
Alrighty. Okay, folks, well, you hear a lot of rhetoric around there's no business case. No, well, National doesn't agree with that one, but they seem to make a business case for the Western Link there, the trucking one. I made that wrong. But anyway, I've been out there working very hard to talk to businesses, big business, because I know if I go to a hard-nosed political party like Labour, they're going to want a strong business case. And I've got people signing up to a letter of intention, a letter of comfort. So I know that a couple of those people can't be here tonight, but they'll be watching. I appreciate that support. It goes a long way. I can't tell you who they are because it's confidential, all right? It's sensitive. No. I mean,
Go on, Albie.
I don't. Excuse me. One of them's already come out in the media supporting, and they were here at the last rail forum. All right, so they'll come out, right? I'm sure you'll hear about it through the media. But anyway, let's move on.
Well, Albie, can I just have one comment on that?
Okay.
Because I haven't had a chance to do that.
Yeah.
Talking about business cases, let's be clear about this. The American settlers, when they wanted to develop the regions of America, didn't go, can we please have a business case so we can put rail through and develop the rest of America, did they? They put the rail in place and the development happened.
And can I just say that the direct quotes in my submission to NRC from Imri's tableware and Mirasami that support rail. So I'm not sure when you asked them whether that was before those quotes or not.
I think the trick is, folks, the old port of Whangarei used to take 70% of all freight, but then they moved out to Northport and they didn't have a rail line. And that's the key. All up in Dargaville there, if you had a rail link to the port, you'd be like over in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, like at
Albie,
Ruapa.
I think we've got to go back to basics here. What is the role of government in revitalising the regions? Is the role of politicians in government to wait for bureaucrats in Treasury to give us permission to redevelop our region? Because at the moment, Treasury and the current ideology is antagonistic towards rail in our area. So those parties who want to get ahead of the infrastructure curve and actually invest in infrastructure using the reservoirs of capital that we have already in our own country, we're going to do it. I have been running a campaign, New Zealand First is running a campaign, quite apart from the spur to our port at Northport and the industrial zone as a catalyst for the entire region, but our campaign is based about recapitalising rail so that industry, jobs and investment in firms can move out of Auckland and capture economic opportunity in the north and create wealth for us in the north. We're fighting a campaign on that. There's no ambiguity whatsoever about that.
All righty, thank you, Shane. Are we done?
Could I ask a follow-up question on that?
Yes,
And
sure.
I just wonder where the big black Auckland hat, for a moment, if I might, Shane. I completely understand the argument that if the freight and port is moved to Northport, that revitalises this part of the world, this part of the country. I understand that. What it also does is add substantially to the cost of every good that comes through that port to the major market, which of course is Auckland and Point South, rather than Whangarei and Northland itself. So the argument you're putting forward for a nationwide government, for a central government to accept, is that the cost of freight has to increase in order for the region to have that development. How are you going to get that over the line?
Okay, can I defang your fake economics? Number one, it is not even an hour between Northport and the outer stretches such as Albany. If we were to redevelop that port, we would have no shortage of opportunity, and it would be definitely efficient to move many of the goods back into Auckland. Have you asked those questions of the ports of Auckland who believe they're going to go to Thames and Kiowa and build a $20 billion port? Good luck with the Maoris down there. And Have you asked them how often they're going to have to dredge the Firth of Thames in order to get the super vessels up and down there? Or perhaps you too agree that the new port should be at Muriwai on the Manukau Harbour? Ask some decent questions.
Well, I guess the convention is he gets the last word. Can I have another word before he gets the last word?
Why not?
And I'm just going to ask you, Shane, when you answer this, you don't need to insult me at the same time.
No, I'm still sore because of
I
the
know you are.
debacle of a debate
I
that
know you
Spillon
are.
run
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other night
yeah,
in
yeah,
Auckland.
yeah. You're getting in first. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to ask about that. That if the Port of Auckland moves to Thames, Thames is a short hop to South Auckland, to Wiri, to the main inland industrial area of Auckland, which is the country's heartland as an industrial hub.
I think
It's a lot further to Northport.
I think the point you're making, Simon, is that there is a model about developing New Zealand, and on that point I agree with you. That model is called the Golden Triangle. It's Tauranga, Hamilton and Auckland.
Yes.
And if you're not blessed with the privilege of having lived there, apparently, then you're going to be a second-rate economic citizen. I'm not putting up with that. No.
If you go back to the way I asked the question to start with, I didn't say it can't be done. I said, how are you going to get it over the line? What is the argument you're going to make that will make it make sense to the rest of the country?
Okay, I won't eat up into any more time because others need to have a go. The first thing we're going to do is harvest enough votes to create enough leverage to form a government that will fulfil this vital public good function. We're not going to surrender it to the Auckland know-alls or the cash flow PwC accountants.
All righty, folks. We're running to a schedule here, so I'd like to thank all the candidates. I think you've all got a good insight there where they're at. And there's been a good bit of cordial there, mixing it up. I'll see you afterwards if you want to see the letter of intention. I'm sure I can box that off. I'll send a text, all right? Okay, folks, looks like we're ready to go into debate number 2. So what I'll be doing here is I will be welcoming our senior politicians from the main 4 political parties. Ms. Julianne Genter from the Greens. Mr. David Parker, down the end from Labor. Dr. Shane Retty, National. And of course, the Right Honourable Winston Peters, New Zealand Police. Okay, so the format is, folks, 3-minute signature speech on their party, and they'll take a seat. And then we're going to go into what you see in the House, right? Oral question time. So each political party representative has been given 2 policies that seem to be an issue out there for the public. They want to know around housing, immigration, environment, climates, education, health, crime, trade, employment, right? So we've worked it out, and they'll get 1 minute to speak on that, and then the other MPs will get to ask a supplementary question each to that person speaking. All right, so it'll be a fair contest and a robust contest. We'll have Lloyd and we'll have Simon coming and asking the hard questions at the end of it. So we're all watered up, drink up, folks. First to the stage, Miss Julianne Genter for the Green Party. Give her a warm welcome, folks.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. My name's Julianne Genter. I'm a Member of Parliament for the Green Party. I've been an MP for 5.5 years. I never thought I would be a politician because I was really interested in solving problems. And it turns out that in order to solve the challenges that we are facing in the 21st century, we need politics more than ever. But we don't need the type of politics that is a couple of elite people representing elite interess fighting with each other in a room somewhere. We need inclusive politics that involves all of us with a diverse representation of New Zealand with young people represented in the decisions that we are making now that will affect their future. The Green Party, I joined the Green Party because I think they best represent the values of all New Zealanders. We care about looking after our natural environment for the long term. We care about fairness, about ensuring that every child in Aotearoa grows up in a warm, healthy home, that they have access to the basics that they need to live a good life. And the truth is that government has a vitally important role to play in protecting and empowering our people and looking after our environment for the long term. Now, the Green Party is a long-term democratic movement. We've been built from the grassroots, and yet without being in government, we have influenced the agenda. We put child poverty on the agenda. We put cleaning up our rivers on the agenda, and climate change. We were campaigning on that decades ago. We have consistently brought practical, positive solutions that have been picked up by the other parties. If you share our values, if you really care about clean rivers in New Zealand, if you want to help build an economy that is going to protect and enhance our climate so that your children and their children can grow up with a stable climate. And if you believe that every person in New Zealand deserves the opportunity to have an affordable, healthy home, to have enough to eat, to earn a fair wage for a day's work, then vote your values. Give your party vote to the Greens. If you don't vote your values, if you're not thinking about the long term, who will? Please join us in ensuring that all New Zealanders can enjoy this beautiful country we call home and work together to make it even better for the long term. Kia ora koutou.
Thanks, Julianne. Yes, David Poker.
Good evening. Thanks everyone for coming out. Can I acknowledge my fellow candidates on the podium tonight? I don't have much time to talk about a lot of topics in detail, and I don't really want to skim over a lot of them superficially. So I thought I'd talk about what I think is probably New Zealand's most pressing issue, and that is that in our country, which is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. All of us, we've got cell phones and cars and dishwashers and, things that our prior generations didn't have. Despite that, we don't house our people. And we've got the highest rate of homelessness in the OECD. We've got a lot of very low standard housing. The North has got some appalling houses that are just about falling down around people's ears. And we've got families crowded into houses so frequently that we've got the rise of third world diseases like rheumatic fever and skin diseases. We've got kids that are living in vans. We've got people living on the streets, and as a consequence, we've got more beggars in the street. And I really think that we can be better than that as a country if we address these housing issues. We've got the lowest rate of home ownership since the early 1950s, and it's continuing to decline. It's set to decline even further, as evidenced by the fact that people who are, the lowest rates of home ownership amongst the young. And as that feeds through, we're going to have more people living in poverty and the elderly. One of the most out of control areas of government expenditure is the accommodation supplement, which is close to doubled. Imagine an area of government expenditure like that having to double because housing costs have become so high in so many parts of New Zealand and are rising faster than wages. Now, what do you do about it? Well, the problem splits into two halves. Who owns the houses that do exist, and how do you build more? And in respect of more and more of our houses are owned by landlords rather than people who live in them, and some of the answers to that lie in the tax system. People who own lots of houses can gear them up with lots more debt. As soon as they get close to making a profit, they buy another house so that they always run them at a loss, and they offset the losses against their other income. And some of these richest people in society pay lower rates of tax than you people in the audience here because they've got that tax dodge. And we say we're going to close that down. We're going to ring fence losses. We're going to say if you buy a property, a rental property, not your own property, a rental property, and you flick it off within 5 years, you'll pay tax because you've made income from that house, that should be income for tax purposes as well. In respect of in respect of building houses, actually, it falls to a Labor government every few decades to just say, look, there's actually a market failure. There's not enough small houses being built. We're going to build 100,000 houses spread through the country. Most of them will be in Auckland, but some will be up here, so that we can actually put some people in some affordable, smaller houses. Smaller houses because they're cheaper to build.
Awesome, thank you, David. Dr. Shane Reddy, National. Folks, give him a warm welcome. I'm really appreciative that Dr. Shane Reddy fronted up today. I tried to get Joyce here, and I tried to get Simon Bridges, the Transport Minister, but they've put up Dr. Shane Reddy, and I'm grateful for you turning up because you're making this a lively debate.
Oh, kia ora koutou, thank you. Look, I've already introduced myself this evening, so I'd just like to acknowledge the other candidates. Nā mai haere mai ki te rohi o te whangarei. And I'd like to start, first of all, with a few local reflections, and then I'll broaden it to trade, and then I'll broaden it to national leadership. So I've already described our strong local economy earlier this evening. Let's look at some of the things we've achieved together recently, which will continue to support the Whangarei economy. 500 million for a 4-lane highway from Whangarei to Ruakaka roundabout. 50 million rebuild and modernisation of Whangarei Boys High. 21 million for Hundavasa tourism infrastructure. 20 million for Portland end-of-life tyres, and the refinery has a large shutdown scheduled for next year. We have jobs in Northland. The challenge now is getting people into those jobs. We currently spend $12 million on trades training in Whangarei, and I want to work with business and tertiary providers to increase local trade apprenticeships and use the $50 million that we recently received for getting young people off benefits and into work. Now, we're in this position because a strong and stable government has returned the books to surplus for the first time in many years. In 2008, we inherited interest rates at 11%, burgeoning national debt, and run-down state houses and schools. Under the guidance of Bill English, we all turned that around. We tightened our belts and traded our way out of the GFC. Local land-based industries traded their way out of the GFC, and now 50% of exports are covered by free trade agreements. We opened our skies to Philippine Airlines, Singapore Airlines, Qatar Airways and Emirates. These airlines bring tourists to Whangarei, and tourism is now the biggest contributor to the Northland economy, providing thousands of jobs. With a stable government and a strong economy, we have low inflation and low interest rates. This allows Whangarei businesses to invest and employ people, and for young people to have low interest rates for home mortgages. A stable government generating surpluses means we can raise the minimum wage every single year, maintain wage growth at the 4th fastest in the OECD, increase benefits for the first time in 40 years, roll out the family incomes package, which will put $1,000 a year in hard-working New Zealanders' pockets. In a stable, united government, and the experience of Bill English, that it is a stable, united government, and the experience of Bill English that has got us into this position, our Prime Minister should be someone who has had their leadership tested under severe world conditions such as the GFC and brought us through. Our Prime Minister should be someone who has had their leadership tested under severe natural disasters such as Christchurch and Kaikoura and brought us through. The last statement I want to make addresses our rural community and sets a policy difference. This government recognises the economic backbone that is farming, and we will be upfront and fully transparent with our policies. We will not be introducing a water tax for farmers. We will not force farmers into the ETS when there are no solutions. And we will not be introducing a capital gains tax on the farms and herds that they have worked so hard for over so many years. What we will do is continue to open markets for our rural goods with a goal of 90% of exports under free trade agreements by 2030. Thank you. I heard the time.
Thank you, Shane. Awesome. All right, last but not least, please welcome the Leader of New Zealand First, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
At the beginning of tonight, there was a video of an expert on business in this country who says that Wellington is not listening. In February and March of 2015, I made a decision to stand in a by-election and to put it all on the line because as a Northlander, born here, schooled here, worked here, I had seen years of neglect. I've been to school closures in the Kaihu, north of Dargaville, to the shutdown of the Dargaville courts and countless things over the years. And I suppose because I was living in Tauranga as an MP somewhere else, I never stopped to sort of think, what on earth is going on with representation in Northland? But I got a clear fix when I was asked by a lot of people in January and February of 2015, would I have a go for Northland? I was already an MP and I was already leading a party, and this is a huge electorate, a very big electorate. But I thought we should put it all on the line, and I'm glad I did. I'll tell you why. The Prime Minister at the time said he hasn't got a dog chance, and it's that sort of arrogance and decades of neglect which bespeaks the Northland situation. It has got all the assets and beauty and everything that you could possibly want, and it's the top half of the export-earning electorates in this country and the bottom of every other thing. And I wanted to turn into a two-horse race and take on the prevailing political establishment, which is national. And if we want to change in this part of the world, north of Auckland, you need to change the way you vote. Why? Because for the first time they're listening. Now they're all scrambling. You're hearing of $500 million motorways all the way down to Marsden Point. Anybody tell you where the money is? No. No, they didn't stop there. They're going to have a motorway all the way down to Puhoi. Where's the money? In the budget? In the preview? Any documents say it's there? No. Whangarei boys, $62 million. Just like that. A PPP, if you know anything about economics, Mr. Reddy, PPPs are internationally despised. They rip communities off. And when did we stop the people from Whangarei getting their own educational facilities back? Why isn't Treasury budgeting for Whangarei's boys like Northland College and everywhere else? But here's the real point. You need to turn it into a vote between two parties. You might think it benefits me to say that, but I'll tell you what, in the end it'll benefit you, because for the first time, you've got them listening, you've got them dead scared. No one's saying we won't get a train now to Marsden Point. No one's saying we aren't going to do this, that, and the other thing. No, what they're saying with respect to the moderators is they're going to contemplate between 10, 15 or 20 billion in a hopeless proposal down the Firth of Thames, written by the transport geniuses of the world, namely those accountants, Ernst Young, and the rest is history. How much are we going to save? Well, we'll save billions and billions and billions by going to the only deep water port there is with the transport utility which we can build for a fraction of what they contemplate. More importantly, ladies and gentlemen, Northland will go back to being what it was about 925, when it actually had someone running the country. Most people don't remember who he is, but I had a man called Coates, and you know how he got there? Because he ran a massive infrastructural investment program. Coates off with Coates, Coates the man that gets things done, and by geez, we need experience and action right now here, and I'm offering it, and so is Shane Jones.
Thank you, Honourable Winston-Peters. Does the panel want to ask some questions now?
Yes.
Yes, they do. Fire away, Mr. Wilson. And to who?
Thank you. Winston-Peters.
That's me.
I couldn't help but hear a little barb aimed in my direction, I think. Greatest respect to the moderators in relation to the shifting of the Auckland port. I just want to say firstly that I'm strongly in favour of shifting the Auckland port off the Auckland waterfront. Don't have a view beyond that where it should go. But I was very interested to hear you say that by moving it to Northport, it would save, and this is a quote, this is what you said, billions and billions and billions. Can you point to evidence for that?
Yes, Northport is well on the way to its development. It has got the deepest harbour in this country, requiring the minimalist of dredging for the future of maritime interface with this country. If you know anything about international shipping, that's what's coming. It has huge flatland area. It has a designated railway corridor to it, and it just lacks a thing called commitment and local vision. Now, the cost you've got to think about is as a part of New Zealand's nationwide transport strategy, whether it be shipping, rail, or by road. Now, if Auckland is central to that, you have to look at the alternative cost, which is massive down the Firth of Thames. You're going to have to virtually dredge half of the Sahara to even get there. It's preposterous and extreme. The alternatives, Piha, Muriwai, and the Manukau Harbour, are just so ridiculous, nobody halfway sane mentions it. But it's part of a national strategy, And that's what a wise government at central level will do, and then you get the savings, because I tell you the difference, Shane Jones is right, the speed with which you'll take it by rail, not just to Auckland, but to South Auckland and beyond to the Waikato, and match it up with Tauranga, makes this a great plan for the future. One thing that we've got on our side, of course, is we've got a marvellous environment which should have people coming to, but they don't because of lack of work. And our special industrial and commercial zone will change all that.
And all I'm asking you, I'm simply asking you if there has been any study done to back up what you're saying.
Yes, there have been transport studies about the best place for the ports of this country. The reason why they haven't come out over the last 16 to 20 years is that they ran into the interface of parochialism of politics out of Auckland.
Okay.
Can I have a quick supplementary on that?
Yeah, let's keep away from rail because we're going to be debating rail, so we don't want to be debating in this session.
Well, when Mainfreight talks about a rail to Northport being a no-brainer, I think he knows.
Oh,
I don't think these guys do.
Don't worry.
I think he knows, I don't think they do.
Can I also...
All righty. Mr. Lloyd Burr.
Can I also just add to... I've read the Ernst & Young report, which looked at the... I think it was Ernst Young, that looked at the alternatives to the current Auckland South siting, and it in itself was very superficial.
True.
And I don't think we're in a position to conclude that the other options to the central Auckland site are affordable. And that's why the Labour Party's proposal in respect of this is that we need to have central government oversee a study as to what are the true economics of the alternatives. And I have a suspicion that Winston's right in that. We're not in a position from opposition and Labour to conclude that he's right, but I suspect he is right that the costs of the Manukau and the Firth of Thames options will be very much more expensive than the Northport option. Once you put something on a train, whether it's from the Firth of Thames, the Manukau or Whangarei, the cost of pushing that train to Auckland and the time it takes is not large.
All right, thanks. Let's move on. Lord Burr.
Just very quickly to Winston Peters. If the harbour here is so deep and good for big ships and stuff, why are they proposing to dredge it?
Well,
to make it.
Well, if you understand the level of research that's gone into it, and it has been considerable, not far off the exit of the port, there is a slightly shallow area that will have to be marginally dredged. That is so inconsiderable compared to what you're prospecting to do in the Firth of Thames, let alone every other ecological disadvantage you're going to suffer from.
Great.
I'll come in here actually on that one, Lloyd. I understand, talking to the union out there, that they've dredged out there and they didn't take it out far enough, so they dumped it out there and now they're going to have to re-dredge it. That's the problem. All right?
Oh, heads should roll for that.
I wasn't going to tell them that, but you've been...
Okay, I don't want to spend too much more time on rail now because it's not giving Ms. Gender an opportunity or Dr. Reddy. Let's keep it on their speeches because they've got to make their speeches 2 more speeches each, all right? And then we're going to rail. We haven't got all night because the theatre's got to pack out for another gig.
Albie, could I ask Shane Reddy a question from his speech?
Sure.
I tried to write it down fast enough, Shane, and I don't have shorthand, so I may have got it wrong, but you said our PM should be someone tested under the severest national disasters like earthquakes in Pike River. Bill English wasn't the PM during the earthquakes of Christchurch and Pike River. What?
So you're right, I didn't say Pike River. I said of Christchurch and Kaikoura.
Yes,
Bill English wasn't the...
But it's been under his guidance, or certainly he's been the architect behind John Key, so I take the point you're meaning.
I'm sure you'll understand the point I'm getting at.
I see what you're getting at.
For 8 years, the national government has told us how proud they are to serve under John Key, and now the narrative is he didn't exist, and Bill English was running it all the time. It can't be both.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Yep. With little doubt, the Deputy Prime Minister has a significant say in the executive decision. So yes, of course, John Key was Prime Minister, but without doubt, Bill English would have had a significant say in the collective decision-making.
Okay, just moving on from the semantics there, very quick-fire question to you, Dr. Reti. How big is the hole in Labour's budget? You have to put a figure on it.
Oh no, that's beyond my pay scale. I wouldn't want to give a fair and honest answer to that, so I'm going to say I don't know.
It would be the first one from the National Party if you did.
Yeah, give them a hand for that, folks. Give them a hand for that. Shane, stop indulging in dirty politics. Okay, we're going to move on now. We're going to go into signature speeches on issues, policies that are concerning people. Now, I outlined them earlier. So we're going to start off with Right Honourable Winston Peters, and it's immigration. You have 1 minute and a half to talk about bullet points on immigration. You can sit down or come to the lectern, your call. And that, sir, I've outlined the program tonight. If you don't like it, away you go. All right? You want to come run the show? Come up here and run the show. All right? So, Cannon. So what we've got Winston talking about immigration. Following that, we've got Julianne talking about environment, climate change, housing, Shane, and then education from David. So Winston Peters, away you go. 1 minute and a half, your bullet points, please. The other members will be able to come in with supplementary questions, and we'll spice it up a bit. All right? Away we go.
A founding principle of New Zealand First is that we'll always need immigration to fill the gaps in science and education and other areas that we have ourselves not provisioned for. But that immigration should never ever be used as an excuse for failing to have educated, trained and employed your own people first. Right? Now that's where the horrible disjunction of New Zealand immigration has become, because we know smart countries bring in experts from all over the world to help them out, but they don't take on mass numbers the size of Rotorua. That's 73,000 coming every year, net that is, and that's 13,000 deficit going offshore as New Zealanders, not as the National Party claims they're all coming home, not true. But you can't bring in the population of Rotorua every year without you build Rotorua every year. Houses, schools, roads, everything that's required. And they've done nothing like it. And for not just the National Party, but for a long time. And my party's been a bit lonely in the wilderness saying, look, there's a price for this and it's coming one day and it's here. And tragically now, we've got ourselves in a way where we can't possibly fix it. Because what's being offered here by way of house building numbers doesn't even get 40,000 people climbing off the plane at Mangere a house, let alone those tens and tens of thousands who now face, and there'll be hundreds of thousands, never ever prospecting being the owner of their own home, or putting it back 10, 15 years and changing a whole lifestyle just because some thoughtless, visionless politicians were so cavalier about the care and attention to their own people's needs first. That's why I make the stand I've made for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Winston. Supplementary question. Who's coming in? Who's first?
I'll ask one.
Ms. Genta.
The population of New Zealand is smaller than many cities overseas, and yet those cities have enough housing and infrastructure and jobs for much larger populations than we have. Do you think it's possible that if we invested in the infrastructure and we protected the environment, we protected wages, that having more people in New Zealand wouldn't actually be a problem?
You asking me?
Yes.
Well, the precursor to the Greens, the Values Party in 1972, wanted zero population growth. That's when they...
That doesn't answer my question.
I'm giving you the answer because I remember...
Okay, I didn't ask about the Values Party.
My point is you bring people here when you've built the infrastructure, somewhat like the person who said at the beginning, Mr. Leach, Chris Leach actually, I was very grateful to him, about how they built things over there because people would be coming to it, they could have had the foresight. And these people never went to university, never got any training as planners. They just were plain common sense people. Now, I can say this, we can do far better, but we've had the two things going on here. We haven't built anything, and we haven't got the capacity to build anything, and now we've even got people arguing, we've got to bring these people in to build the buildings that they all need to live in.
Well, how, that's a question. That is a question. Our construction industry is at capacity right now, and so we need more people to build the housing, to fix the housing deficit that's been created. I'm just wondering, given that there's
well, actually, that's nonsense.
There's 10 million people in London, and there's jobs and there's infrastructure, so we could have 10 million people.
Order, one at a time, please.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mind if someone asks a question, but I don't want to have an answer at the same time.
Yeah.
I just think it's disingenuous to say that new people coming over here are stealing jobs when people coming over here create jobs.
Okay,
you asked
it's a question you're asking.
I'll give you the answer. You have just said that we have not trained all our young people, not skilled our young people, or that, like you're building this, our young people are so useless that we've got to go and get foreigners. Now, I resent that. I'll tell you why I do. Because I saw, as a young person, thousands of Maori coming into Auckland, Wellington to trade schools, being apprentices, making and creating this country to be one of the greatest home-owning ratios in the whole wide world. I have lived through the vision I'm talking about, and you are telling me to take care, to accommodate a nightmare born of those people who have never had the courage to say, enough's enough. Turn down the tap.
Don't you think the failure is the failure of the government to invest in infrastructure, to protect wages and to protect the environment? The problem isn't other people.
No, I don't. Look, these people here are all taxpayers. None of them could afford the volume of people you're bringing, and you're defending bringing in 73,000 a year to a population that's 4.8 now, but one of the world's small economies, where the large economy like the UK has a target only of 100,000. And Australia used to bring in only 80,000
themselves. The UK has
themselves.
60 million people. And it's not a problem.
It's the size of the economy that matters.
More people means more jobs, a larger economy, and the problem is the failure of the government.
No.
Okay, well, you guys want to blame other people for the problem, but the truth is
I'm
that
not
it's a
blaming other people,
failure
I'm
of
blaming you.
neoliberalism. It's a failure.
I'm blaming you.
All right, let's move on. Mr. Parker, have you got a question? Dr. Reddy, or you want to move on?
Winston, were you blaming her because she sounds foreign?
Yeah, I'm an immigrant. Every person in New Zealand
I'm blaming her
descends from someone who came here as an
I'm blaming
immigrant.
her because she's
when did
talking-
we lose our
she's a
values
green-
about caring for other
She's
people?
a green talking neoliberal rubbish.
Oh, no. Excuse me, Winston. I just said the failure was neoliberalism, and the failure is the
Oh, you
failure
wanna
of
have
the
it which way, do you?
government to
All right,
invest
order,
in
order.
infrastructure, protect wages, and protect
Make
the
up your
environment.
mind.
This man will blame other people. He's like Donald Trump.
All right, I'll go get some popcorn.
Now that
I
is an
think.
insult.
Okay, we're going to move on, and I'm going to jump into housing.
Make
Dr. Shane
Northland
Reddy.
great again.
We're just going to move on. We're taking too much time. I'm going into housing. Dr. Shane Reddy.
Thank you. Look, housing's been a challenge for many governments for many years, right back to the 1970s, and it's a challenge for us now. If we look way back then, when you had the family benefit, you could capitalise it, get a state advances loan at 3%, and then the policy changed. Instead of only being able to build a new home, you're actually able to get an existing home. So suddenly, we didn't have as much building. We could go back to domestic purposes benefit. When it came in, suddenly there was an increase in demand. But fundamentally, New Zealand being driven by Auckland, the biggest issue has been the metropolitan urban limit. So that's the history that gets us here. Let's talk about what we're doing about it. First of all, special housing authorities. 209 of them we've set up, speeds up the production of houses. Secondly, urban development authorities and urban planning authorities. Now, the latter is recently announced. We don't believe the RMA, even though we've cut some of that red tape, we don't believe it's serving us in this way. So urban planning legislation is what we're looking at doing. And the third thing is the $1 billion Housing Infrastructure Fund to wrap the infrastructure around new houses as they're being built. We're in the longest and strongest residential construction build at the moment. So we're building houses furiously. We've taken the tariffs off building products. That's our plan for housing.
All right, well done. Thank you. Supplementary questions. Who's first? We'll go over to Mr. Wilson.
Thank you so much. Special housing areas speed up housing. You know, Shane, that half the special housing areas in Auckland have had nothing built in them. They have simply been a mechanism to transfer wealth to speculators.
I am aware of this because David Parker asked this question every day in the House, how many houses have actually been built. So I am aware that it's not a substantial number, but I do believe that it certainly has advances towards the goal. Yeah.
How many houses were built in Auckland in the last year?
Oh, I don't know that number, I'm afraid.
I do.
Yeah.
Between 6,000 and 7,000 and not nearly enough.
No, they had 14,000 consents and 7,000 completions.
That's correct.
How many new...
Double the number of consents to what's built, that's correct.
And how many people are coming into Auckland each?
43,000 plus.
There's 33,000 empty houses in Auckland.
All these numbers are right.
What about Whangarei? How many new houses have been built here in Whangarei over the last year?
I don't know that number, but I do know that the builders are very busy, very hard to get builders at the moment, so I can't give you a number, but residential growth is substantial. What I do know is that 1,500 people a year are moving to whangarei. 50% of
I reckon-
them
I
are in
reckon
retirement age.
you should ring
and
Nick
a large
Smith.
number are out at One Tree Point, 237, and there'll be new builds, so I do know that.
You should ring Nick Smith. Nick Smith always has a number.
And it's usually the wrong one.
He said that our water royalties were going to cost $600 billion per annum, which is twice New Zealand's GDP. You can't trust his numbers.
All right, any more questions? We moving on? We're moving on. Ms. Genter, environment, climate change.
How many of you have seen the news about Hurricane Irma, which is hitting Florida as we speak?
Yes.
And how many of you saw Hurricane Harvey and the results of that? The truth is that Hurricane Irma is the strongest storm to cross the Atlantic, and the reason this is happening is because of the environment in which all storms form has been made more extreme by warmer air, warmer water, and that is a consequence of us polluting the atmosphere, which means that we're trapping more energy in the atmosphere. Okay, well, I just say
Order,
like,
please. We're not having people sitting there dealing direct with the politicians. Show some respect, please. And carry on, Ms. Genter.
so, I mean, our government, all the governments in the world signed up to an agreement that we were going to limit dangerous climate change through human activities. That just means changing a few things. One, stopping the use of fossil fuels, oil, coal, gas, changing our land use, the way we produce food, and ensuring that there's more forests. Those things, just those simple actions, will not just benefit the climate, ensure we have a stable climate. They will clean up our waterways. They'll ensure we have clean air. They'll create jobs for people. This is the opportunity that we have, but it requires government leadership. And we've had a failure of leadership from this national government who've done nothing but put in place an ETS, which is subsidized polluters. And rather than reducing pollution here in New Zealand, we're going to spend billions of dollars to buy credits from other countries. It doesn't make any sense. We could be investing in infrastructure that reduces pollution, protects the climate, like rail infrastructure, which the Green Party has been advocating for many decades now. We could be building warm, energy-efficient homes using timber that's grown here in New Zealand. All we need is that government leadership, the right price signals, and we need to say no to fossil fuels. And we've got the potential to have electric vehicles, but right now they're too expensive for most people to buy. So government could quite easily ensure, like Norway has, that it's easier for households and business to buy those electric vehicles, which saves them money on petrol, means cleaner, quieter vehicles in the streets. This is what the Green Party supports, and we can be doing this together. I know most parties up here agree climate change is happening. Do you, Winston? Do you think climate change is happening as a consequence of human activities?
I'm so pleased you asked that question.
Okay, here we go. Here's the question.
And if I can have a brief moment, I'd love to answer it, because this is what the latest sort of expert in this country, in whom many people trust, said. She's the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, and she enjoined all parliamentary parties to follow the Norwegian model, which was adopted by the UK, strangely enough, by the Conservative Party. And funny enough, since 2011, the only party in Parliament that's followed the Norwegian model, stated in its manifesto, is New Zealand First. Thank you for asking.
What's the Norwegian model?
All right, got to move on, folks. Got to move on. Dr. Shane Reddy.
Yeah, thank you. Can I talk to that? Norway produces more tonnes of CO2 than New Zealand does, around about 11 metric tonnes per capita. New Zealand produces 7, so I don't know if Norway's a good model to hang ourselves on. Furthermore, if you look at their global footprint, which is beyond CO2, which also talks about forests, which also talks around fishing and other ecological mechanisms, Norway and the Scandinavian countries sit above the global average of about 2.7 global hectares, and New Zealand's at about 2.2. So I'm not convinced Norway is actually the model to be hanging ourselves on,
That's not
or
true.
any of the Scandinavian.
I'm sorry, Shane, that's not true. New Zealand's got the 5th worst per capita emissions in the world.
Not the CO2.
Canada, the United States.
7 tonnes. 7
Just
tonnes
looking
per
it up.
capita.
Japan.
What's Norway?
All right, we're
11.
not dealing in fake news here, folks. All right, keep to the facts.
Check it up. 11.
Just
Thank you, Ms.
a
Jenner.
question for Winston Peters. You didn't quite answer Julianne Genter's question there. Do you believe in anthropogenic climate change?
Well, why do you think I adopted the Norwegian model 2011 if I didn't believe in climate change? And even if I didn't, our international markets believe in it, so they'll force us to behave that way whether we like it or not.
Okay, so that's a yes, right? Just so we're clear.
Well, no. Don't get cute with me.
I'm not. I just that you just
It was yes in 2011, and every year after that.
Okay.
Don't be second guessing me
See, Winston
sometimes.
agrees with me. Climate change is happening. It's causing the storms to be more frequent and more intense. And if you want your kids and grandkids to live on a stable climate, we have to start doing something about it now. And we can. That's the best part. We can. It is a huge economic opportunity that will create jobs, create healthier, happier communities here in New Zealand. But we have to have government leadership.
Okay, all right, good for you all. David Parker, you want to come in?
What's that?
You coming in on this?
No, I'm happy to wait my turn. Otherwise, we'll be here all night.
I thought climate change was the nuclear-free moment of the Labor Party, and you're not going to comment on that.
Well, actually, if you want me to comment, I could talk all night because I'm a former climate change minister. Actually, if you want to talk a little bit, New Zealand's emissions split roughly into two halves. Agricultural emissions and carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide splits into three parts. Electricity, under control, heading towards 90%, will then go to 100. Transport, technological solutions out there, electrification of transport, other solutions, maybe a gas transition for heavy transport. Industrial heat, we're going to need a gas transition to push Fonterra off coal in the South Island before they move into pure renewables to dehydrate milk and the other. The big and most difficult issue is how we reduce the other half, which is important. How you do that is through getting an appropriate price signal in there so that you get more forests and less livestock emission whilst getting wealthier as a country, as we also invest in the technologies which will bring forward things that will make the North very wealthy, which is more horticulture and crops.
What a modest man. Give him a hand. All right, moving on. Education, we hear from you again, David. Education, David Parker.
Hey, look, I think the two most important services that government provide voters are education and health. In education, at one level, New Zealand's got a pretty good education system. We rate pretty well in the world. We're actually not going up as fast as our peers, and in some areas we've been going back a little. But nonetheless, overall, our average is pretty good. Our problem is that the distribution of that average is unusual in that we've got, instead of a normal bell curve that goes up and down sort of equally both sides, we've got a very, very long tail. And that long tail is associated increasingly with poverty. The OECD have said that the reason that we have got underperformance of that long tail is that those kids are coming out of poor families. Now, of course, housing's part of that. We've talked about it. But you've actually got to get more money in the pockets of those families that are lowest income. That's partly through good wage policy, but it's also partly through, we say, giving what we call the Best Start payment, which virtually everyone gets in the first year of their child, which is $60 a week. And then it's highly targeted in years 2 and 3, so that we can get these kids to the point of early childhood education. Then early childhood education is where you pick these kids up and carry them forward before they get to school, because we know that if they don't turn up at school ready to learn, then they fall behind from an early age and they fall out of the system, and you know, it's very hard to resurrect them. Now, we're going to reinstate incentives for 100% teacher-led ECE. We're going to push them into the poorer areas, and all early childhood education will have to be 80% plus qualified teachers. In primary, our main thing that will probably affect you, in addition to extra funding for teacher training and the likes, is we're going to say $150 per child per school, primary and secondary, if they give up on their so-called donations, which have gone up, voluntary donations, so-called voluntary donations have gone up 50% under this government at a time of very low inflation. And then in tertiary, we say that tertiary is the modern secondary school, and that everyone needs, during their lifetime, to have 3 years post-school training. Could be an apprenticeship, could be going to university. We start with 1 year free next year, and then over successive 3-year terms, we get it up to 3 years.
Okay, mate, I'm going to have to call it. We're starting to run out of time. Excellent. Winston,
I thought I'd saved my time from the earlier things.
I was going to ask David. David, in this huge academic debate we've got now, and it's a lot of it, it's a theoretical debate as to which system we should follow. Why is it we can't get it through the the people of this country in a way, at a certain level of leadership, the massive economic cost of the drag of failure at the bottom? I think they can understand that and how, the world that's coming, that is going to be so much worse in effect than it used to be.
Well, you see
Maybe
that.
we could shift people's thinking on it.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. We're, as I said before, we're a really wealthy country, and yet we've got people stuck at the bottom generation after generation. And, education is the great social elevator. It's the opposite of inherited privilege, and you've just got to invest more money in it. I know you need to also improve parenting skills, and those sorts of interventions are necessary. And some of the early intervention stuff that the current government's done, I actually agree with. But I really do think that you're not going to overcome these problems if you've got parents who aren't doing a particularly good job raising their kids, and there are some parents who don't, most do. Actually, the place that you intervene is through the education system to give those kids a chance so that they can get ahead, even though they've had a difficult start in life.
Okay, well said, well said. Right, I'm going to move on here because I'm conscious of the time, folks. Okay, we're going to move into you, Dr. Shane Reedy, covering health.
Yeah, sorry, what is the second question?
Health.
Health.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've put more money into health than any government for many, many years. If you look at those receiving under 13, let's start with primary care, for example, under 13 free access. The increase in utilisation from Māori children is 17% with that policy. So started with under 5s, went to under 13s. That's been a huge success. We're doing more large joints, hips, knees, etc. We're just totally pouring a lot of money into health and understanding we were not doing so well. For example, we're actually not doing so well in mental health. That's why in budget 2017 we put $224 million into mental health. And even then, I believe we're probably going to need to do more. In fact, when I was back on the DHB, we used to ring fence mental health money, called it Mason money, and you just couldn't cost shift it across. And I think that's probably what we need to be looking at. Anyway, $224 million, budget 17, $100 million for social investment programs, the 17 programs you heard the Minister announce, $100 million for DHBs, and a letter of intent from the Minister to them saying mental health is a high priority, and furthermore, your outcomes are going to be reportable and publicly disclosable. So you can see this Minister is certainly spending a lot of attention on mental health, and I suspect we're going to need to spend a lot more. So I could go into a lot of health, but maybe just happy to take questions.
Yeah,
Well, can I ask?
I've got one. I haven't had any such yet.
Okay, hang on a minute. We'll go to you, Mr. Parker, first.
Yeah, did you really say that you've been doing a lot more large joints in Northland?
Correct. And then qualified it with hips and knees. We know what you're thinking. We know what's on your mind. You need to be sitting next to Julianne.
Okay, Winston.
Look, why do you always refer to how much money you're spending, but you never mention how much money you're spending per person, which will tell you whether you're right about increasing the expenditure per person or you're actually decreasing the expenditure, because all around this country you've got district health boards that think you may not be overfunding them. Quite the contrary, they think you're massively underfunding them, and Northland's a classic.
Northland got a top-up of $21 million last year and $28 million this year. So we're getting top-up funding to take that into account.
And they're not making a return. They're not making a return because they think you've massively underfunded them. Is that true or not? It was in the Advocate just last week.
The answer to that is you are correct. We are being underfunded.
Thank you very much.
You are correct. And we were topped up. And just so we're clear why we're being underfunded, when Christchurch happened, there was a large population shift. And an equation came in that said you couldn't have more than 5% from your previous historical. So no matter how, if all of the people moved to Northland, we're never going to get more than 5% than what we had last year. So the formula doesn't make sense, but it was there to accommodate the large population shifts that happened in Christchurch. That's what's hurting us, that artificial formula. That's what I've been working on for 2 or 3 months with the Minister, saying this doesn't work for Northland.
After 9 years, you've worked out the formula doesn't work.
Mr. Ginter.
In Canada and many states in the US, more than half the states in the US, in Portugal and in many other countries, the Netherlands, they've had legal, affordable access to medicinal cannabis to help with pain relief, to help people who are suffering, being treated for cancer. It's been proven clinically to help with multiple sclerosis. Why is your government only allowing medicinal products that come from pharmaceutical companies overseas that cost $1,200 a month and not allowing legal access and the ability for people in New Zealand to actually develop a medicinal market of cannabis right here in New Zealand that would enable that relief to people and that would be affordable and safe and legal.
So I have no issue with medicinal cannabis. You're right, it is used for multiple sclerosis. It's actually used for spasticity. It just happens that multiple sclerosis has a lot of it. I'm also okay with it for terminal pain relief. What I do require, though, is, and this is the issue, it needs to be of a pharmaceutical grade.
Well,
it needs to be
it
of a
isn't
grade.
in Canada.
It
It
needs
isn't
to
in
be of a
Hawaii.
grade that's
It
not
isn't
going
in
to harm
Washington,
New
DC.
Zealanders.
It
And it's
doesn't
not
harm
clear through
people in those
FIMAC that
other
if we don't have
jurisdictions, and it's been
pharmaceutical grade,
20
that will
years.
happen. So pharmaceutical grade cannabis with guidelines and regulations from my college saying, Dr. Reedy, you can do this and this, I will be happy prescribing it.
All right, can you at least admit that not one single person has died of a fatal overdose of cannabis, and yet we're prescribing pharmaceutical grade opiates, which cause addiction, people can overdose, they're far more harmful.
I don't think that decision's actually for politicians. That's actually for scientists and others who do a lot more of this than you and I do.
And that's what
my
the
belief.
scientists
No,
say.
they're not.
That
It's
is
not
what the
FIMAC is
scientists
saying.
say.
No, it's not.
If you say that you would happily prescribe as a doctor pharmaceutical grade cannabis.
Yes, if I had the guidelines from the college as to when I could use it and how I would use it.
I mean, it's not like you're part of a government or anything that could make that happen.
We will see in September.
Well,
Okay.
Anyway, Lloyd, why are you so interested?
I'm
All
a
right,
man
any
of the
more
people.
questions on that one? How are we all feeling, folks? We carry on?
Let's talk about rail.
Okay.
Should we talk about rail?
Well,
why
hang
don't we
on.
just go to rail?
We've got trade, right? This is significant.
Did you say trains?
Trade.
Yeah, no. it's
Right?
just-
David Parker, I want to know trade. TPPA, what's going on? What's the position?
Yeah, I heard, Shane, that they've got a target now of 90% of all exports being covered by free trade agreements. It's a nonsense target. You could reduce your exports and still meet the target, and they have. They promised to increase exports from 30 to 40% of GDP. They've gone backwards, and they currently sit at 27% of GDP. I mean, the problem in trade is actually the flip side of the housing problem. Because people are spending so much money on their housing, there's less money to invest in other parts of the economy. That's why we've got what economists are calling a productivity drought in New Zealand. If we really want to lift incomes in New Zealand, we have to improve productivity by investing more people, human capital, and more money, financial capital, in growing competitive advantage, new products and services to sell to the rest of the world. That is how you build trade. Yes, free trade agreements have a place and they're important. In respect of TPP-11, a mere shadow of what it was before America pulled out, our biggest problem is that the current government has overridden the prior consensus that is you don't stop future governments restricting who buys your land assets. And under TPP-11, the government has purported to trade away New Zealand's right to stop foreign buyers of our homes. Labor says ban them, National says don't. They're entitled to a different view, but they shouldn't sign trade agreements that stop doing this. Final point, if we let it go through in its present form, it flows through to the Chinese free trade agreement. China has the right to ban New Zealand buyers of their houses, and they have done in some of their big cities. We have the right to ban buyers of them buying our houses here currently, but if we sign TPP-11, that same disadvantage in respect of the prohibition on a ban on foreign buyers flows through to the Chinese free trade agreement on what's called the most favoured nation clause. The big issues in trade, in my opinion, aren't under trade agreements. They arise from our appalling productivity record and the fact that exports are dropping as a proportion of the economy.
Righty. Questions, Dr. Shane Reedy.
Yeah, thank you. So while we get all excited about tariff barriers coming down, probably non-tariff barriers where most of our gain may be, but David was talking about the very important Chinese free trade agreement and the fact that that allows foreign buyers to buy New Zealand houses, New Zealand land. Let's just remember,
it allows us to ban them.
But let's just remember that was signed by Phil Goff in the Great Hall by Labor in April 2008. And it was ratified by Labor in October 2008.
No, and I'm standing by it.
And it was a great piece of work, don't get me wrong.
No,
but you can't sort of run with the hare and hide with the hound.
No, I'm making...
My question is, will you be looking to unbundle free trade agreements if you're banning foreign ownership? That's my question.
No, because the Chinese free trade agreement and the prior agreements all had that protection in it. to allow a future government to ban house sales and farm sales. The problem is that your government, look, they did it. Australia's got the right to ban them under the TPP 11, and they do. South Korea has retained that right to themselves, and you've given away that right in the South Korean Free Trade Agreement. I can't understand that. It's either incompetence or ideology, because how would you have a one-sided arrangement like that with South Korea?
So would you undo our South Korean
Can I just say, can I just say in 2008, when this was all being done, one party said, hang on a second, is this the best deal we can possibly get? Now, the National Party backed the deal. They didn't give a damn what the Labour Party signed up to, but we hardly got out of there. The Aussies did a deal, and we found out how bad ours was. So we started arguing about having ours reviewed. But it wasn't the best deal we could have got, and the Australians demonstrated that very clearly. But we didn't learn from that. We went to the Korean deal, and you got tariffs of 173% against us. And I know something about this because the president at the time was President No. That's how his name was pronounced. And I said to him, I want you to be called President Yes in my country, but I want a fair deal. Well, I'll tell you what life's like. He said to me, when I was sitting there, as you do by Foreign Affairs, to get a free trade deal, to open the conversation with him, and he said to me something utterly staggering for a New Zealander, and particularly for a Northlander, because you know how many people we sent from here into the Korean War. He said to me, but what's in it for us? And I'm thinking of all those people I knew that went to even from my relationships, who went to fight in Korea, and I said to him, I tell you what's in it for us. I was so furious. I said, when your country was putting on the line for democracy to even be free, my country, a small country, put it on the line for you. And when your economy collapsed in 1997 from the Asian currency crisis, my country was one of the few that underwrote your economy. That's what it's in for you. He looked at me so embarrassed, he said, I'll give you a statement tomorrow that we'll have a free trade agreement with New Zealand. But I never thought what I planned back then to get, and it's all minuted, ended up in a free trade deal where they got all the benefits and we got very few.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can I bring the panel on? Any questions there to Parker?
Sorry, what's that?
Any questions from the panel?
No, I just want to get on to trains.
Okay. Yeah, I think we do call time, folks.
Yeah.
All right, we've all got to go home. And we want to talk about, we've heard all that, I'm here for trains, right? I'm here for rail. You're all here for rail. Okay, so what I've got here tonight is we've got a person that's going to give us the figures on some costings. So when it comes to rail and the North Auckland line, there's 3 trunks of work that needs to be done. Doing up the North Auckland line, there's tunnels to be done. A couple of tunnels there, there's a few bridges. The rail into the port is another trunk. And then getting through Auckland is the other trunk of work. So where's me runner? Out to Mr. Dave Gordon's there, sir. Dave Gordon from Kiwi Rail. Those of you who were here at the forum last April, when the underfunding of rail and we lost the log train. Dave got beaten up that night, but this time he's come along. Good on you, Dave. I don't want you on stage. Give him the mic. So, we got it working? Hang on.
Just come up to the lectern so we can get you on the live stream.
Oh,
That'd be great.
crikey. Yeah, okay, Dave, up you come. Up you come.
Thanks to all of those who have tuned in on the live stream.
Give Dave a warm welcome, folks. It's good of him to come along. At that log meeting, he was a brave man, so was Shane Reddy. They really got it.
Making first point, it's always challenging when you're an SOE and you're standing in front of a political debate. So the point I'm making here is that Kiwi Rail can't stand on at this lectern and make promises or statements or favour one or other party. I'm here to give you the facts about the costs as best as we understand them. Albie was right. You've got to break the costs into 3. The first element is to turn the North Auckland line into a line which is the equivalent of, say, the rail to Napier. To do that, we have to expand the size of the tunnels. We have to replace about 18 kilometres of lightweight rail, several low-strength bridges to be replaced, some changes to passing loops and some upgrade to the radio system. To keep a figure in mind, realistically, that's going to be circa $100 million. And you have to do more or less all of that at once, because you don't get any benefits from increasing the size of tunnels until you've done the very last. Ditto the bridges, ditto the rail. That still leaves you a legacy of track renewals and other network renewals to be done. That legacy is the size of another $200 million. You would spend that over a period of 15 years. It doesn't have to be spent at once, but it does have to be done. So 100 million to do the upgrade in the first instance, 200 million over a 15-year period to complete that job. To make the connection to Marsden Point, it's 19 kilometres. Firstly, we have to buy the land. It's designated, it's consented, but is not all owned by QRail or Northland Regional Council. Currently, about 25 to 30% of the land is owned. We have to create the corridor through some fairly challenging territory, put the rail infrastructure in, connect to the port and into the North Auckland line. There may or may not be some piggybacking available if some of the NZTA realignments go ahead, but the number that I think we should bear in mind for doing that work is circa $200 million.
All right.
At that point, what have you got? You've got a railway line that is fit for purpose running to Northland, a connection to the port. But what you don't have is ultimately the connections through Auckland, and that is the substantial challenge that has to be faced. At the current moment, there is only double track through the Auckland area, and with the City Rail link going in, that will fill up with suburban services. If the rail to the north and from the north is such that you need to get a lot of traffic through Auckland, then there are some very substantial investments to be made in the Auckland rail area. We have not done estimates for that, but fundamentally you have to put a third track between Swanson and Westfield. That number would be, I would say, in the $2 to $3 billion mark. Those are the numbers that we are holding in mind, and at that, I'll leave the meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. Well, those figures are right. Now, who wants to start away? Who wants to start away out of UMPs?
Could I ask a question, just before that gentleman leaves, could I ask a question in respect of the $2 to $3 billion cost through Auckland? Is some of that cost going to be necessary anyway as a consequence of increasing use of the rail network in Auckland?
Yep. Here we go. Dave's back.
Yep.
The work on the north and western line would not be necessary as a result of the increase in domestic traffic, of metro traffic. Work on the line to the south, on the North Island main trunk, would be necessary as a result of general growth and freight operations.
Thank you.
Could I ask you this? Why would you need 18 k's of rail renewals if you had been maintaining that line properly in the first place?
The rail is fit for purpose for a slow-running service.
What,
the
5
upgrade,
k's an hour?
the upgrade that I was referring to is that which is necessary to run our standard 18-tonne loco axle weight with standard 18-tonne axle load wagons at 70 to 80 k.
Yes,
that is the type
how
of
many
expenditure
times going
required.
south how many times going south are you reduced to between 10 and 5 k's an hour?
I don't know the actual number of times, but I know at the moment there are 65 minutes, I believe, of speed delays on that line.
Well, does that not suggest to you that if you've got 65 minutes of speed delays, that you've had years and years of neglectful management of that line? Does that not suggest that?
No, that was Faye.
Okay, it's really a funding issue, all right? This government puts in, what is it, just under $250 million.
Albie, I can't stand here and
Yeah, okay, well, you can
debate
leave, I can
the
carry on.
adequacy or otherwise.
Well,
of
look,
funding.
can I
That's
just
not,
say,
that is not my role here.
I was a young boy at school here, and we all left school, all along the line, to see the first speed rail cars come north. That's when we used to maintain them. Now what happened?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to account for these figures that are coming out of mid-air as though there are costs all to be imposed on us, as though that is a consideration without having regard to how on earth this happened.
Well, to be fair, you were in Parliament during the time when successive governments stripped back the rail, sold it off.
You just answered.
The reality is we've had many, many decades in New Zealand of treating road and rail completely separately, and that's led to substantial underinvestment in the rail line. You're absolutely right, Mr. Peters.
I can't believe you said that. You know what?
No, we agree on
I
many
can't.
things.
No, she doesn't agree with me at all. She almost said that I was responsible.
No, but you were there.
I was there. Who was the parliamentarian on the 20th of July, 1993 said this is a massive fraud about to take place against the people of this country? One parliamentarian said that, and he was a member of the National Party. He'd been expelled for saying those sorts of things by that time.
That's good. But having been in government since then, you haven't quite been able to get the
fix the whole lot up.
substantial change in the transport investment.
And
But
you
that's all
guys-
right. I'm
and
not
you
blaming
guys
you.
would?
Yeah, I would. I mean, that's why I got involved in politics, because I was a transportation planner before I joined the Green Party. And I joined the Green Party because they were the only party in Parliament in 2006 who was campaigning for electrification of the rail network in Auckland. And we won that. We won that when the Labour government lost a seat, when Philip Taterfield was convicted of fraud or corruption. And suddenly the Greens' abstention was much more important to Labour, and we were able to convince them to invest in electrification of the rail network. You were in that government too, so hopefully you helped with that. I don't know. All I know is the Greens made it happen, and since then we have consistently argued for a rational investment in transport, where we open up the transport budget and say, why we've got $30 billion over the next 10 years of central government money going into transport. There's a substantial amount of money that could be put into extending electrification of the North Island, investing in extending the rail line to Marsden Point, improving the North Auckland rail line, and we're committed to doing all of those things in a new government. And we have outlined a transport budget where we've shown how we're going to pay for all of those investments.
But these people want to know, are you going to give us a modern, efficient railway line from Hamilton all the way to Northport and revive this province?
Well, we're
Yes
definitely...
or no?
Yes.
Can I ask a question which I think Julianne probably knows the answer to? How much did Waterview Tunnel and the associated sort of spaghetti junction cost?
It was 1.4 billion plus the associated costs. It got closer to $2 billion.
$2 billion.
There was $2 billion
yeah.
spent on the Waikato Expressway, which was completely unnecessary, and all it does is increase the speed with which trucks get to the queue in South Auckland, so they save 20 minutes.
And let's not forget
how
the
much is the
east-west
toll?
link.
Yeah, so can I make the...
David, how much is the toll on Waterview?
There's no toll.
Nothing, that's right.
I know.
Yeah,
Tell them.
but so the point I was going to make was that one of the Labour Party policies at this election is to allow rail to compete into the Land Transport Fund, because at the moment it has to get capital from special allocation from taxes going to rail, and we say. And it's interesting that Main Freight and even Richard Prebble, who has rather checkered history with rail,
Not really checkered.
that's right. In fact, yeah,
Okay, so we've got consensus on that, David,
So,
on these other parties.
It's an incredibly important point, because if if there's about $3.5 billion going into the Land Transport Fund every year, if you can get rail partially funded from that. Because at the moment, it sort of always has to go cap in hand for the government with its begging bowl out for big capital projects. Now, there is that large fund, and if you're going to have rational land transport planning and funding, then they ought to be on a more equal funding footing.
Albie, can I say that's a brilliant policy and a brilliant answer. When I first saw it, I saw it in my manifesto.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it was... I've been the person in Parliament talking about this for 6 years, but I'm really happy that the Greens have been so effective at convincing everyone that we need a sound transport policy.
Okay, yeah, Chris, you can have
Thank you.
What's happening?
Let's get real here.
What's happening here?
Well, he's up on stage.
We're going to change the rules halfway through.
We have.
Which party are you from?
Excuse me.
Social Democrats.
I'm a deputy leader.
Okay, Let him have a say.
You know.
So,
He fights for rail, come on.
Winston, you very kindly complimented me on one of my earlier things that I had to say, so you may compliment me on this one as well. Look, currently the government spends $4.5 billion every single year paying the interest bill on its borrowing. $4.5 billion. When it could be getting that money from our own central bank, because that's what Japan does, that's what China does. So we're talking here about a rail network to Northland, including all of those 3 tranches of work that Dave Gordon was talking about, and he's only quoting $2.5 billion. There's still $2 billion left over in 1 year. Now that project is going to take 5 years to build at least. And if you do the maths on that, 1 month's worth of interest that the government currently pays over 5 years would pay to put the Northland rail line in and do all the other changes that are involved. So let's get real. Let's not talk about taxing people anymore. Let's get some common sense into the way we finance our infrastructure projects.
There you go. Thank you, Chris Letch, putting it out there.
I've got a question for Dr. Reti. KiwiRail at the moment is instructed by your government, or the government you're part of, to be commercially viable. Do you think it provides, well, I mean, it does provide more of a service, but why don't you recognise the service that it provides to the country in terms of reducing the number of trucks on the road and all those types of things?
So in budget 2017, we topped up KiwiRail by another $500 million, $500 million. And the point was made about the Golden Triangle, the Hamilton, Tauranga, Auckland. That's a very successful rail link. So certainly it can work. But if you want to see commitment to KiwiRail, you can see our government continuing to pour money into it, fundamentally representing that in some places it's not breaking even. But what I did want to come back to, because you raised an interesting point, was the economic priorities for Northland were set by the Northland Economic Action Plan. And this is the plan that defined road versus rail. This was the priorities that were set. And I just want to go over who the stakeholders to that were. Far North District Council, Kaipara District Council, Northland Regional Council, Whangarei District Council, Iwi Consortium, MB, Primary Industry, Social Development, Education, Te Puni Kōkiri, and Northland Inc. When they set out the Northland Economic Action Plan, they did not prioritise the Marsden Link, which I think...
Well, you didn't even mention
Dr.
rail
Reddy,
in that plan.
So I just want to be clear on that.
Dr. Reddy,
they set out the Economic Action
Dr.
Plan.
Reddy, this is the second list I've heard you put out tonight. The first list I heard, you put out here, but you didn't tell everybody the one piece of essential information you needed to. The list you wrote to, that rail wrote to, they wrote to see whether they would contribute to the line. Not whether they'd use the line, but whether they'd pay for it. Right or wrong?
Wrong. What they actually asked was, would they use it? Why would they not use it? What were the issues and hurdles? That's actually what was asked.
Look, you've got Japanese companies in this country who have told me that. There are people here who know exactly what happened. They said, well, we'll keep the Portland line going, but the junction going, which they've closed, but you'll have to pay for it. Now, they've said it also. You've had ministers in the House tell me that. I've said, is the line to Dargaville shut? No. Well, if it's got no trains on it, isn't it not shut? No, it's open. How's it open? Well, if you put the train on it, it's open. That's a parliamentary answer. You've got it twice, and the one north of Kauri all the way going north. You've got ministers giving those sorts of lousy, two-faced answers, and and that list went to those people saying, how much are you prepared to contribute for this line to remain open? Now, if you ask people that, they're entitled to say, excuse me, you provide the service and I'll pay for it. You pay for the line. You've been actually hijacked here, but the one part you left out was, this was a hugely taxpayer resource-paying enterprise back when Booz Allen said it'll make 100 million plus a year. This is in 1992. Within a year, your party had privatised it and was then destroyed. The shares went before to $9.34, then they collapsed to 28 cents. That's the history of a National Party handling of railway, and now you're being told that the cost is because of you.
And can we talk about you mentioned that your government's been putting money into KiwiRail, but it only does it on a 1 or 2 year basis. So there's a 10-year transport plan and budget that excludes rail, because KiwiRail has no ability to make a long-term 10-year plan with assurance that there's going to be money there to invest in the infrastructure, to do things like keep electrification of the North Island main trunk line. So KiwiRail is being told, you've got $500 million for the next 2 years. Meanwhile, during that time, you're going to spend $6 billion mainly on the road network. And KiwiRail is going to get rid of electric locomotives and replace them for diesel in 2017. How does that make sense?
How does that meet your obligations to climate change and the Paris Accord?
Yes, we'll still meet that aspirational goal. 20, 30, 30%. This is just one part of it.
Magic.
This is just one part of it.
And how? How are you going to do it? Because it's forecast, because just right now, on the government's own numbers, we're forecast to increase our carbon pollution, our greenhouse gas pollution, by 40% by 2050 on your government's policies.
Sure. So we're going to move to more renewables, so less coal.
How?
Yeah.
Where's the strategy? Why aren't you phasing out Huntley?
Indeed.
Why aren't you saying no new coal?
Oh, no, we were initially. We
No.
had it on the plan,
Initially?
and then we pushed it out for a few years. That's exactly
Why?
what we're going to do. Secondly, user choice. We're encouraging of the cycleways, like the
Can
one
I
about
just,
100 metres
Mr.
from
Chairman,
here.
can I just say to everybody
Electric
here...
vehicles, a third of the government fleet. There's a number of things, including the ETS, that we'll use to reduce climate change.
Can you
Okay, let's
just
get
answer
back
the
to
question
rail.
about,
We're
back to
do you
trains.
think rail should be part of the 10-year transport budget?
Back
and
to
if not,
trains.
why not?
Back to trains, can I just say the great news is that neither the Labour Party, the National Party, or from the point of view of their leader, is ruling out what we want here for the railway all the way to Northport and beyond.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to talk about the rail link to Northport. Okay, that is the key to the success of the Northland Line. Now, Dr. Reti, we've got the Hundavasa that you've championed.
Correct.
Okay, along with local business and local artists and donations around the country and whatnot. And you've got the cruise ship market, like to every other port in New Zealand. They want to come to Marsden Point. And how are you going to get them into town to the Hundavasa? What's the best way to get those big ships with 6,000 people on them? You're going to get them in by bus and cram up down there? Or you're going to bring them in by train?
Trucks.
Well, really, there's
Trucks, modern trucks.
There's only two ways, by road or up the harbour. That's the only two ways there are. That's
If
how
you've
they're
ever been
coming up.
on a cruise ship, the last thing you want to be doing is jumping on another boat, and they don't like buses
No,
either.
it's
They
done all
like
around the
steam
world.
engines, they like fast trains.
It's done all around the
And
world.
under
They
other
can tender
smart
off the harbour and
governments,
come in
that'll
on
happen.
tenders, so there's other ways to do that.
I think one of the issues for the link out to the port is that the council's already spent a lot of money on the designations. And I met with the council earlier today and they made the point that they can't afford to hold that land forever because they've got other things that they need to spend money on, and that they want a decision out of central government that either buys the land off them or calls it all off. So there's a decision coming that has to be taken, and I think the council's been very responsible in putting the designation in place and buying up some of the land, and they plainly can't do this by themselves, and they need a decision. I agree they need a decision, and our route through to that is via the port strategy. Other people might be a wee bit further ahead of us in that regard, but that's how we see it, that we've actually got to have a good look at the Tauranga, Auckland, Whangarei options quickly, and then make a decision so that Northland Regional Council can get their money out.
Okay, I want to bring Lloyd Burr in here because Lloyd's been doing some reporting. We all missed the 6 o'clock news, and Lloyd, I'll bring you in what's the developments of what you've been covering up here.
Yeah, did anyone see my yarn tonight? Oh yeah, so it's it's pretty much that the rail workers are fed up with the condition of the track. The track, for those who don't know, passenger trains can't travel on it. KiwiRail doesn't allow the passenger trains to travel on it because it's too unsafe for them to travel at the required speed. If they did travel at the required speed, they'd probably derail or something like that. I checked out the track. It was in some parts it was pretty terrible condition, and it's not KiwiRail's fault. It's just that it's not a priority route for KiwiRail because the route doesn't make money, and KiwiRail is instructed by the government to make money. But the workers have pretty much given KiwiRail and the government an ultimatum: fix the line, bring it up to standard, make it safe for us to work on, or we're out, pretty much.
That's right. So I'm the chairman of the Rail and Maritime Transport Union up here, and we had the CEO visit the other week. And we wanted, for this event here tonight, we wanted to have similar to what they've done in Otrahonga, where they had a steam fest, right? A carnival. Steam engines going there to Otrahonga. The council was behind it. 12,000 people travelled on the trains. It was a highly successful event. So we wanted to have a steam engine just running between Portland, from Whangarei station to Portland and back. throughout the weekend. We couldn't passenger the train up because the track's too unsafe for passengers. Now, it's a huge expense to bring it up. If we'd had the weather like we had here, unless you'd pre-advance booked your tickets and that, it could have been a failure and we're out of pocket. So that's the reality. So our loco engineer said, well, you know, if it's unsafe for passenger trains, why the hell are we driving on these tracks? Now, we've had enough, and there's an election coming up. And they're saying, we've got a strong mandate. We want the national government to tell us.
We don't want a national government.
No, to tell us the intentions
Don't
before
show your bias, Albie.
before polling day, all right? So we want an answer out of your government, Shane. So you're going to have to go to Simon Bridges, Stephen Joyce, and tell the people of Northland what your intentions are. That's what we want to know, because we've got New Zealand First that's pro the rail link to the port, the upgrade of the lines. Labor look like they're doing the same, and certainly the Greens. So what's it to be, was the question.
Well, whilst he's answering, could I just say to Mr. Gordon, I'm sort of somewhat apologetic of the approach I took to you this evening. It must take a lot of courage to come along here.
Yes.
I want to say one thing. We've got an aspiration to make a QL an enterprise you'll want to work for. I mean it.
So on that note, I would like to thank each and every member of the RMTU rail branch that unanimously said, we want to find out, because we're going to start looking for jobs, all right? Because they've had enough, all right? We want the good material in the tracks. We don't want to be patching up. We want to be putting in concrete bridges, concrete sleepers, doing the tunnel work, getting a rail link to the port, creating real economic development here for Northland. And that's not happening under this current government that just seems to be mad on roads. And when you've got people like Ken Shirley, a former transport minister, right, that just isn't right. And you all saw that video beforehand with Don Braid. Yeah. Right, he's a captain of industry. He's saying there is no vision, just like Julianne said, where you need to plan ahead. All right, you need to think ahead than short term, and that ain't happening.
Have we got a pledge from Labor? Is there a pledge at all from Labor to fund this whole upgrade?
No, our pledge is to make a prompt decision after reviewing having a port strategy that involves looking at Tauranga, Northport and Auckland, because I think that's the key. And it may well be that Winston's right in his analysis of the cost of moving the port. And so that's as much as you get from us. We're saying that we'll do that. In terms of Tony Savage here, you heard from earlier today, he says that if he's elected here, he'll be beating us up every day until we make the right decision as he sees it. But that's where we stand.
All right, we're going to have to start winding it down, folks. We've gone way over time, and there's another group that are having to work through the night. So we've gone past 9 o'clock. We're supposed to be finished by 8:45. I'd just like to some closing speeches on rail, commitments, what you're going to do, tell the punters. Start with you, Mr. Peters.
I've made a commitment to ensure that this port, for a start, reaches the developmental capacity that it is capable of servicing the whole nation as the #1 port in this country, because it's got the capacity that no other port has got, and the flat land to go with it, and with the kind of industrial and IT utilities we'll put around there, which I've seen in other countries in the world, that offers an exciting prospect. But the railway to it is critical, and if you cost that against the alternatives, which are extraordinary in the way that they've been assembled in Auckland, our biggest city, and there's only one word to describe them, every one of those proposals is just preposterous, and the cost in the end is a massive savings to the nation, and indeed to our economies, which are interlaced. I mean, Auckland is the product of all these regions, not the other way around.
That's right. Right?
If it was to burn down tomorrow, we could build it again. But you do the rest, you destroy the regions, and you will have no Auckland. That's what I'm trying to say, and therefore I seriously make that commitment, and I mean business, and so does my colleague Shane Jones. And we know that if you give us the backing in this campaign, there won't be people standing around arguing as a bunch of bureaucrats in Treasury and politicians hiding behind them. This is a commitment we're going to make, and we're going to keep it. And you're only a few days away from that becoming a reality. Now, that said, I've got to be on a plane to Gisborne tomorrow out of Auckland because I can't make it out of Whangarei. And the campaign must go on. I've got a huge electorate.
Yes.
And I'm campaigning nationwide as well as here. But my major preoccupation at this point in time is to see that when this campaign is over, we don't just have a few tweaks here and a few tweaks there and no change as we've seen for 33 years. We need a dynamic economic change that delivers a social change as well, because the economy we've got, contrary to what's been said in the First Leaders' debate, is not strong. And no matter if you're a defender of this present economy, if I went to the first 14 issues that concern New Zealanders, everyone has this common feature. All of them are massively underfunded. And a massive underfunding everywhere means you can make a surplus, but you're not serving the economy or the social life of this country properly. So that's what I want. Thank you very much. The party's New Zealand first. We've had enough. Hope you have had as well.
Winston Peters, give it up. Thank you, Winston Peters. All the best in your campaign. Miss Julianne Gender, rapping for you, the Greens.
There are only two parties on this stage that are committed to changing the government and actually ensuring that we're going to have a government that's going to look after our people and our environment for the long term. We have this opportunity for a generational shift, one that's going to bring the values of New Zealanders to the heart of a new progressive government. And my commitment to you, if you give your party vote to the Greens, we can form a government with Labour, but better than that, we can put transport and rail on the agenda as we have for so many years. I want sensible investment in transport infrastructure around this country. We want to revitalize rail and coastal shipping. We want to set a target so that more goods are being moved around this country by rail and by sea, not big heavy trucks destroying the roads, making the roads less safe. We want passenger options. We want kids to be able to walk and cycle to school safely. That makes sense. That's their birthright. They should be able to do that. And we can do that within the existing transport budget simply by prioritizing things in a smarter way. And that's what the Green Party has to offer. Future is in your hands. It's in your vote. If you want a strong voice on the environment, on people, and on sensible solutions, party vote Green.
Thank you, Julianne. Give it up, folks.
So the closing debate has been around rail, so I'd like to offer some closing reflections on that. First of all, if there are commercial quantities of freight at commercial rates, KiwiRail will carry that freight. Secondly, show us the business case. If you have a business case, show us the business case, Albie. Let's have a look at it. Thirdly, you mentioned coastal shipping. That hasn't come up tonight. Let's talk about that. In fact, you can talk about it or actually do it. So 2 years ago, I picked up coastal shipping as a really important initiative to open up our coastal corridor. I brought together all the key players, Northland Inc., head of the Maritime Union, regional councils, brought them all together and said, I'm interested in coastal shipping. How does this work? Brought together foresters, brought together Cullen McCullum. He knows how to barge logs, for example, out of the north, and we formed a plan. And over the last 18 months, we've been really working hard to get that off the ground. Well, I'm really proud that 2 months ago, we unloaded 5 barges of logs at Northport. That is the equivalent of 75 logging trucks we unloaded at Northport. So again, you can talk about stuff, we can actually do it. I'm a doer. Secondly, the build it and they will come, the philosophy for Marsden Link. My government got that wrong in the 1970s out at Marsden. It was called Marsden B. We built it and it didn't work. I do not want to go down that same path again. We want to try our very best to use the wisest way we can to use taxpayer funding. I do see rail in the future of Northland. I need to make that very clear. I just need to make good use of taxpayer money to get there. Thank you.
Thanks,
An incredibly exciting election, this one. I think there are going to be books written about this one, and I'm going to ask you all to party vote Labour. I think Jacinda Ardern is going to make a wonderful Prime Minister. She's trustworthy, she's intelligent, and she has a vision for this country. So you've got a choice about whether you vote for the future or the past, essentially. And I say vote for the future. And if you want to get on top of the housing crisis, you've essentially got a choice between tax cuts of up to $20 a week or more spending in health and education and other social services, but more for money in the pockets of those poor children. I'd say party vote Labour.
David, I wonder if I could ask you a closing question. Following from what you just...
I thought we'd been let off now.
No, you haven't quite. The poll suggests that you are right, that Jacinda Ardern will be the next Prime Minister and that Labour will be forming the government. I happen to believe the polls in this case, but I don't know.
Yeah, neither
But
do I.
my question to you is, if Labour is forming the next government and has the ability to choose between the New Zealand First Party and the Greens, perhaps with the Māori Party as well, which way will you go?
Above my pay grade, but Jacinda Ardern has said that she will honour the agreement to make the first phone call to the Greens.
The first phone call could really be, we're really sorry, James. It doesn't really mean anything, does it?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to give you any more answers there because I'm not in a position to, but I would say that until Saturday week, everyone on this panel, including Winston Peters and others that are there, they're saying vote for me, vote for us. And so until the election is over, I've got but one message: party vote Labour if you want to change the government, and then we'll deal with the cards as they're dealt to us by the good electors of this country.
Thanks, David. The panel would like to wrap. You'd like to wrap your thoughts of the evening?
No, I'm not seeking election, so I don't really have a closing argument, but thank you all for coming, and thanks to all those who've joined in on the News Hub live stream, and that's all I've got to say.
And I'd like to thank you all for coming as well. I'd like to make a special mention to the helpers. Kevin Gross, you've been outstanding today, brother. He's set the tables up, he's done all the background work as the good man that he does. Also, I'd like to thank Kate for her work she's done as well tonight, out of the blue. We got her up here. Can't be all about me. I'd like to thank each of our politicians for coming along tonight. I think it's been a good corridor. They've shared a lot of views there. I'd like to thank people for watching on News Hub. I'd like to thank News Hub for providing that service. I'd like to thank you, Lloyd, and I'd like to thank you, Simon Wilson. And I wish you all a good night, and I wish you safe travels home, and I wish you to vote wisely. If you want to grow Northland Rail. Thank you.